Welcome to Dungeon Academics. My name is Thomas and I will be your instructor. I had an idea and I spent some time working on it, and after a while I realised it wasn't an idea and I abandoned the whole thing. But I'd like to talk about that idea anyway. I'd like to talk about my thought process, about why I abandoned it and why that's probably a good thing. Okay, let's look at Dungeons and Dragons. In Dungeons and Dragons, you have two very important things: your proficiency modifier and your ability score modifiers. These affect almost every single element of the game mechanically. It tells you how good you are at certain things, whether it's resisting mind control, hitting someone with a stick, throwing a fireball that can't be dodged, saving yourself from poison, or persuading a guard to let you into a prison. Your ability score modifiers and your proficiency bonus are flat modifiers that improve or decrease the chance of your success. But what if these weren't static modifiers? What if they were dice? That was my thought. How could we make that work? I'd like them to both use the same scale, so a +2 proficiency modifier and a +2 ability score modifier under the current rules would both be reflected by the same dice, potentially. What that does mean is I need a situation where there is something for 0 and potentially something for negative modifiers as well. And I thought maybe starting as 0 as being +d6, because then there's still space to reduce the dice for negative modifiers. But that takes you all the way up into territory where what would I use for a +6 proficiency bonus or a +12 with expertise? You start to get very large dice or multiple dice there. The effect this has on your probability graphs is quite nice. With flat modifiers in a d20, each of the 20 results is equally likely. You have a flat distribution. But when you start rolling a couple of dice, what happens is you get a tail, and then you get a plateau, and then you get another tail. And so your rectangular distribution now has slightly rounded edges, but is still flat in the middle. And then when you go to very high level and you have higher proficiency bonuses and higher ability score modifiers, these would both be replaced by larger or multiple dice. And then the whole thing becomes a bell curve. And as I was doing this, I thought to myself, I've made videos where I talk about how I don't like bell curves. Is this still a good idea? And the good idea part of it is that it increases granularity. Granularity is the scale at which you can change things. If you only have 2 values, it can be +0 or +1, you have 2 settings. On the other hand, if you have a +d6, you could get a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's 6 settings. There's more things to change and more things to tinker with the more granular the system is. A great example of that is the original use of hit points. I haven't been able to check the authenticity of this, but even if it's not true, I still think it's lovely. That the first use of hit points was in a naval simulation, and it represented the number of 14-inch shells that it took to sink your ship. So a small ship like a frigate or destroyer would only have a few hit points because it can only take a few 14-inch shells before it sinks, whereas a battleship would have lots of hit points. Now, on a human scale, it means that every player character has 1 hit point, because one 14-inch shell is an incredibly vast weapon system. On a human scale, even the most powerful character would definitely be killed by 1. So on our scale, there's no granularity. You have 1 hit point, you're either dead or alive, and every attack does at least 1 damage. On the scale of a battleship, when you might have 20 hit points, that's enough granularity to represent different stages of being damaged. So I was doing this to try and improve the granularity. I also had this idea that weapon damage dice could be based purely off your, let's say, strength bonus. And that you would have a situation where light weapons and small weapons did 2 dice damage, medium did 3, and heavy did 4. So if your damage dice was a d8 and you had a two-handed sword, you'd do 4d8 damage. But if your damage dice was a d6, that two-handed sword would only do 4d6. I quite like that idea, that the weapon then acts as a multiplier for your own damage potential. So that a very large character wielding a knife is probably as dangerous, as damaging as a very small character wielding a greatsword. I quite like that. It would, of course, have mean rescaling hit points. I think it came to a situation where you'd have to increase base hit points for most things by a scale factor of 3, but it would all work out nicely. But as I was thinking about this, I thought, is it worth it? I'm adding a small element of complexity to the game. Instead of going to your character sheet and going, okay, I'm going to add 7 to this, you're going to your character sheet and saying, okay, I'm adding 2d6 and d8 to this. So you roll your d20, instead of adding 7, you roll those extra dice and add them up. That is an increase in complexity. I'm also making the numbers bigger. I think I worked it out that the average task would have to have its difficulty raised by 6 or 7. So instead of easy being 10 and hard being 20, it would be easy as 16 and hard as 26. But it was around this point when everything was coming together, I thought, is it worth it? Is it worth making the game a little bit more complex to make it a little bit more mathematically interesting? Am I making the gameplay more fun? Am I adding choices for the players to make either during character creation or during character gameplay that is worth this small amount of extra complexity and extra maths? And ultimately I thought, no, it's not. It's not worth it. I don't want to make the game any more complex unless I have a very good reason for it, and that good reason has to be fun. And it wasn't any more fun. It was just rolling dice for the sake of mathematical interest. Now, for me as a maths teacher, yeah, I like that. That's fine. But most people are not maths teachers, and most people don't get the same kick from mathematically interesting distributions as I do. So I abandoned it. I've still got spreadsheets with some very beautiful graphs in them. I've got pages of justification and reasoning, but it's just not worth it for me because it's not fun. It's not making the game more fun to play. And Dungeons and Dragons ultimately is a game, and games are meant to be fun. So sometimes you have ideas and you abandon them. It's not worth it. It's not worth the effort because it doesn't make the game better. And that's my thought process. So I've learned something from that. I've learned something that I shouldn't do. And that's still valuable. Thomas Edison, the non-inventor of the light bulb, had his engineers perform thousands of experiments to try and work out how to make a better light bulb, one that lasted longer and could be mass-produced. And, I mean, he's considered the father of the light bulb, not because he invented it, but because he found a way to mass-produce good light bulbs. And when asked, how do you feel about failing thousands of times? He said, I haven't failed thousands of times. I've succeeded in finding a way that didn't work. This is like that. I've succeeded in learning something new about the game, about the balance between mathematical interest and flexibility, but simplicity and fun. And for whatever flaws Dungeons and Dragons has, it has been beautifully optimized for simplicity and then fun. And that makes it accessible for everyone. And that's something that it should be applauded for. The mathematical simplicity, makes the game easy to run, and that allows it to be accessible and fun. So, an idea abandoned is not a bad thing, because it's helped me learn something more about the game, about what makes the game good, even if that isn't my idea, and I'm okay with that. So, hopefully you've learned something too, and enjoy your next game, whatever it may be.